I've been a neurologist for 14 years, but nothing prepared me for the day a patient described down to the smallest detail exactly how I would die. Night in the hospital has a rhythm. Vents whispering, monitors clicking. I was charting in the epilepsy monitoring unit when they wheeled him in. Male, 32, spells with vivid dreams. His name was Elias Moran. He looked sleepless and raw. "Good evening," I said. "I'm Dr. Samuel Halden." He nodded as if he already knew. While I measured his scalp for the 10 to 20 montage, he watched the ceiling camera. "You'll want extra tape on F7, he said. "It peels when things get loud. Do you work in neuro?" He shook his head. "I dream in diagrams." We settled him in bed 14B. Luis, my tech, pasted the electrodes. The EEG woke and tugged thin lines across the screen-quiet hills, then a little static. Mara, the night nurse, set a call button in his hand. "If you sense an aura smell, taste, déjà vu, press this." "The smell is always oranges," he said. "Cleaner on the stair rails, and metal, like a coin." I ordered photic stimulation. Luis cued a flash sequence. Elias barely flinched. His eyes followed an invisible path over my shoulder, as if listening for footsteps. At 2:11, the trace changed. Sharp transients rose over the left temporal chain F7T3, T3T5. His right hand twitched. His lips shaped a word that didn't land. "Elias?" I keyed the intercom. "Stay with me." He blinked, attention tunneling past me. "Door C," he murmured. "The one that sticks. You'll hit it with your shoulder because your hands are full. Third step is cracked. It complains even when no one is there." "Is he postictal?" Mara asked. "Not yet," I said, though the EEG was darkening into a storm. I tried to anchor facts: waveform, duration, pattern. Instead, I tasted pith bitter and artificial. Elias's voice steadied. "You take the radiology stairwell when the elevator stalls. You read the safety poster without reading it." He managed a thin smile. "You hate throwing things away." A broken green umbrella has lived in my trunk for 2 years. I hadn't told anyone. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. He turned his head toward the camera. "Because they don't let me warn the others in time." The spikes surged into a short rhythmic burst, 10 seconds, then loosened. He exhaled. His breath held antiseptic and something copper. "Warn me about what?" I said. His lashes trembled. "Not what?" He opened his eyes and found mine. I felt the vertigo of stepping onto air. "When?" he whispered. 3 days. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't, even after Elias stabilized. After the E quieted and the monitors slipped back into their steady rhythm, his words threaded themselves through my thoughts like a parasite. Door C, third step. Oranges. 3 days. I tried to rationalize. Patients with temporal lobe epilepsy often experience déjà vu, hyperreligiosity, even hypographia writing compulsively. It wasn't impossible that his mind had stitched pieces of overheard staff conversations or details glimpsed during intake into a hallucinated narrative. But the umbrella detail that one wouldn't let go, no one could have known that. At 6:15 a.m., during rounds, I checked on him again. Elias was awake, sitting upright, electrodes still haloed around his head like a crown of wire. He didn't greet me. He only asked, "Did you dream?" "No," I answered carefully. "Did you?" His eyes were too calm. "I don't dream for myself. I dream for others." Luis, my tech, later pulled me aside. "Doc, he said something while you were gone. Asked me if my sister's pregnancy was still safe. Luce's sister had miscarried last month. He hadn't told anyone at work." His face had gone white when he told me. By afternoon, Elias's EEG showed intermittent bursts, spikes like splinters. I ordered sleep deprivation to provoke an episode. It was textbook protocol, but in my gut, it felt like prodding an animal already pacing its cage. At 11:47 p.m., the episode came. His eyes rolled half-closed, lips twitching. The EEG flared. Mara leaned over him, calling his name. This time he spoke with clarity, each word hitting like a hammer. "You'll feel the rail. It will be cold. Your papers will scatter down the steps like feathers. You'll try to grab them, but your hands will slip." I froze. "Elias, stop. Stay with us." He kept going. "It's not the fall that kills you. It's what waits below. The sound of metal on concrete, remember it. That's the last thing you'll hear." The room was silent except for the machines. Even the ventilation seemed to hesitate. Then, just as abruptly, he slumped back into bed. EEG normalized. Episode over. Mara whispered. That wasn't a seizure. That was something else. I wanted to correct her. I wanted to say it was electrical misfiring, abnormal discharges, nothing more. But my mouth stayed shut, because in the hollow of my chest, I felt something I couldn't chart, couldn't explain, couldn't medicate. It was fear. And it had a countdown, 3 days. The next morning, I arrived earlier than usual. My hands shook when I unlocked my office. I told myself it was lack of sleep, too much caffeine, the strain of double shifts. But every corner of the hospital suddenly felt sharper, heavier, as if I were walking inside Elias's dream instead of reality. When I passed the radiology stairwell, I hesitated. The third step down had always squeaked a harmless imperfection I'd walked over 1,000 times without thought. Now I froze at the top, staring at it as if it were a predator crouched in the shadows. My pulse quickened until I forced myself to keep moving. I couldn't let a patient's delusion rewrite the way I moved through my own hospital. Still, all day, I kept catching myself glancing over my shoulder. I double-checked doors, lingered too long in elevators, startled at the clang of metal carts on tile floors. It was absurd. I am a neurologist. I deal with seizures, synapses, science. Fear belongs to superstition, not to medicine. Yet when I returned to Elias's room, he was waiting. Not sleeping, not drowsy. Waiting. "You changed your path this morning," he said. His voice was flat, but his eyes held the smallest gleam of triumph, as if he had been watching me. I forced professionalism into my tone. "Your brain is misfiring, Elias. These predictions are just fragments of abnormal electrical activity. You're not a prophet. You're a patient." He tilted his head. "And yet you avoided the stairwell, didn't you?" I didn't answer. I checked his leads, adjusted a loose electrode. My silence was its own confession. Later that night, the unit grew still. I sat at the monitoring desk, scanning EJACs, when I noticed a cluster of spikes forming across F7T3 again. Elias stirred in bed, eyelids fluttering. I leaned toward the intercom. "Elias, can you hear me?" His voice bled into the room, hoarse but deliberate. They never believed me at first, but it doesn't matter. The dream always wins. I gripped the edge of the desk, knuckles whitening. For the first time in 14 years of medicine, I didn't want to hear the end of a patient's sentence, because part of me believed he was right, and I still had 2 days left. By the second night, the hospital felt different. Corridors I'd walked for years seemed narrower, darker. Every sound stretched too long. The elevators groaned more than usual. The lights above them flickered. Even the vending machine's hum seemed menacing, like a wasp hovering too close. I told myself it was sleep deprivation. Yet when I passed radiology again, my eyes went straight to the stairwell door. The yellow safety poster beside it, the one I'd glanced at countless times without reading, suddenly looked like a warning meant for me alone. Door C, the one that sticks. Elias's words clung like a film to everything I touched. In the monitoring unit, Elias was awake. He smiled when I entered, that same smile that never reached his eyes. "You've stopped carrying coffee down the stairs," he said. I froze mid-step. He was right. Every morning for years I'd carried a thermos down those very stairs. Today, I'd left it in the lounge. "How do you know that?" My voice came out harsher than intended. "I saw it," Elias whispered. "The dream changes when you try to avoid it, but not enough." His EEG leads were still in place, the screen beside his bed glowing faintly. I checked the trace occasional spikes, but nothing dramatic. He wasn't seizing. He wasn't delirious. He was waiting. At 1:39 a.m., the room shifted. His eyes rolled half-closed, his chest rising unevenly. The EEG flared into rhythmic discharges. Mara and Luis rushed in, but Elias wasn't thrashing. He was speaking, clearer than before. "You'll drop the file first. White folder, too heavy, too many pages. You'll reach for it on the stairs. That's when it happens." "Elias," I snapped, "this isn't real." He didn't hear me. His head turned toward the ceiling camera. They always think denial can stop it. It never does. The air grew thick, charged. I swear I smelled it, then the faintest trace of oranges, sharp and chemical, mixed with something metallic. Mara frowned and whispered, "Do you smell that?" Before I could answer, Elias's body jerked once, hard, and collapsed back into the bed. The EEG storm subsided, leading a quiet wave. His lips moved, just enough for me to read them. 2 days. I backed away from the monitors, heart hammering. Logic said seizure aura, temporal lobe nonsense, suggestion poisoning my senses. But a deeper voice whispered something else. The countdown had just ticked lower, and I was running out of time. Morning rounds felt like walking through fog. I reviewed charts, spoke to residents, adjusted medications, but I barely heard myself. Every corner of the hospital now looked like a trap waiting to spring. Every stairwell creak, every clatter of a dropped tray made me think of Elias's voice. 2 days. By mid-morning, Luis caught me staring too long at the radiology wing door. "Doc, you okay?" he asked. His eyes were ringed with exhaustion, but there was something else worry. "I'm fine," I lied. "Just tired." He hesitated, then lowered his voice. "Elias said more stuff last night, after you left." I stiffened. "What kind of stuff?" Luis swallowed. "He told Mara about her father's watch, the one that stopped the night he died. She never told anyone about that. Mara later confirmed it, pale as plaster. He described the scratch on the glass," she whispered. "The exact words my father said before he collapsed. There's no way he could have known." I wanted to tell them both it was coincidence, confabulation, the brain's cruel magic tricks. But my own umbrella, my stairwell habits, the chemical scent of oranges, those weren't coincidences. They were chains tightening around my throat. That night, I avoided Elias's room for as long as I could. I buried myself in notes, in EEG reports, anything to delay. But eventually, duty dragged me back. He was waiting, as always. His eyes glinted when I entered, as though he had been expecting not just a doctor, but me. "You think you can avoid it," he said softly. "But you can't change the spine of a dream." I forced my voice steady. "You're not a prophet, Elias. You're a patient with temporal discharges." He tilted his head. "And yet, you already stopped using the west stairwell, didn't you?" My throat went dry. He saw through everything. At 2:02 a.m., another episode began. His erupted into waves, and his body stiffened. I moved closer, clipboard in hand, determined to document, to remain clinical. Instead, I froze as he whispered, "The file is white. The steps are wet. You'll hear your papers slide like whispers, and when you reach down, that's when the sound comes. Metal on stone, and then nothing. My pen slipped from my hand. My pen slipped from my hand. For the first time in 14 years, I felt like I was the patient trapped, helpless, waiting for a diagnosis I couldn't escape. He relaxed, the storm passing. His eyes fluttered open, fixing on me with unbearable calm. "One day left," he said, and then he closed his eyes, leaving me in silence that felt louder than any alarm. By the third day, the hospital no longer felt like my place of work. It felt like a labyrinth someone else had designed for me to die in. The walls hummed too loudly, the floors groaned beneath my steps, and every clock seemed to tick a second too fast. I kept reminding myself, 3 days was only a hallucination, a temporal lobe fantasy, not a prophecy. Yet my body betrayed me. I flinched at every metallic clang of a drop instrument, every creak of a rolling gurney. Even the smell of citrus cleaner in the hallways made me nauseous. Elias didn't make it easier. He was awake whenever I entered, eyes locked on me like a mirror I couldn't avoid. "You still have time," he murmured as I checked his leads. "But it's thinner now, like ice before it cracks." "Enough," I snapped, harsher than I intended. "You're here to be treated, not to scare staff." But he didn't blink. "I'm not scaring you, doctor. I'm telling you, because I see it whether I want to or not." Later that afternoon, Luis approached me in the staff lounge, lowering his voice so no one else could hear. "Doc, I think you should take this seriously." He knew about Mara's father, about my sister, and now about you. I wanted to laugh, to dismiss it, but the words stuck in my throat. Rationality felt thinner every hour. That night, I avoided Elias until nearly midnight. I lingered in radiology, staring at the stairwell door. The yellow safety poster looked faded, curling at the edges. I forced myself to touch the third step. It squeaked under my shoe exactly the way Elias had described. My stomach dropped. When I finally returned to the monitoring unit, the EEG alarms were already chirping. Elias was in the middle of an episode. His body was still, but his voice carried clearly through the intercom. "You'll be alone. That's how it begins. No witnesses, no rescue. You'll hear the folder hit first, then the rails. And then the sound, the last thing you'll ever hear." I wanted to cut the audio feed. I wanted silence. But I stood rooted, listening as he whispered the final word. "Tomorrow." The room was cold, but sweat dripped down my spine. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was documenting a patient's seizure. I felt like I was watching my own obituary being written in real time. The next sunrise felt like a death sentence being delivered in slow motion. Every hour was a step toward the edge. I sat through morning conference, nodding at residents' presentations, but I didn't hear a single word. My mind was somewhere else, counting the hours, the minutes, the breaths I had left. I tried to convince myself to take leave, to go home, to step away from the hospital entirely. Yet the thought only made my chest tighten. If Elias's dream was inevitable, then avoidance wouldn't save me. Maybe it would even hasten it. All day, I caught glimpses of him through the glass window of the monitoring unit. He rarely moved, rarely slept, just sat upright, with electrodes sprouting from his head like roots from a corpse. Whenever our eyes met, he smiled faintly, as if he were watching the countdown too. Mara stopped me in the corridor. "Doctor, you look pale. Are you sick?" "No," I muttered. "Just tired." But she lowered her voice. "Then why are you avoiding the radiology stairwell like it's cursed?" I didn't answer. How could I? That night, I forced myself to return to Elias's room. I needed to prove something to him, to myself, maybe even to the hospital. The air inside was heavy, oppressive. The faint citrus chemical scent seemed stronger than before, clinging to the wires, the sheets, my own clothes. He was awake. Of course he was. "It's close now," he whispered as I checked the EEG leads. "You can feel it, can't you? The edges of the dream pressing in." "Enough, Elias," I said, gripping the clipboard too tightly. "You don't get to dictate my life or my death." He tilted his head. "I don't dictate, I only describe." The EEG showed sharp bursts again. His eyes fluttered, body stiffening, and then came the voice clear, commanding, impossible to ignore. "You'll carry the file. White, too heavy. You'll lose your grip. The papers will scatter, fluttering like birds. You'll bend down, and that's when the sound comes. Metal on stone. Final, absolute. That's your end." The trace stormed, then stilled. He slumped back, breath shallow. His last words before drifting off: "You won't sleep tonight. Tomorrow it happens." And he was right. I didn't sleep. I sat in my office as the hours drained away, staring at the broken green umbrella in my trunk through the security feed, wondering if in less than a day I would no longer exist. Tomorrow. Always tomorrow. But tomorrow was only hours away. The morning of the third day arrived like a sentence carried out. The sun rose pale through hospital windows, yet I felt no warmth in it. I sat at my desk with cold coffee untouched, staring at a pile of patient charts that no longer mattered. Every tick of the clock echoed louder than the last, a drumbeat marking time I couldn't reclaim. Colleagues noticed. Luis gave me a long, worried look when I passed him in the hall. "Doc, you don't look well," he said. "You should go home." "I can't," I muttered. "Not today." Because home wasn't safe either. Elias hadn't described my apartment, my street, or my bed. He had described the hospital, the stairwell, the steps I'd taken countless times. My death belonged here. Elias himself was silent that morning. When I entered his room, he was sitting upright, electrodes still in place, eyes fixed on the door as if waiting for it to open on its own. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The silence between us felt heavier than any words. By noon, every sound seemed magnified. A dropped pen clattered like a gunshot. A gurney wheel squeaked like a scream. I caught myself flinching at shadows, imagining the scrape of metal on stone in every passing echo. Around 2 p.m., Mara stopped me in the lounge. "Doctor," she said, her voice low, "if this patient is making you feel unsafe, we can transfer him." I wanted to laugh at the thought that moving Elias would change anything. His words weren't contained by walls or geography. They had already taken root inside me. By evening, I was unraveling. I skipped dinner. I avoided conversation. The hospital corridors felt like tunnels leading me toward a single point I could neither escape nor delay. And still, I checked on him at night. My hands trembled as I opened the door. He was awake, eyes glinting in the dim light. "Tomorrow," he whispered, almost tenderly. "Tomorrow you'll understand." The egg beside his bed flickered faintly, but I didn't look. I couldn't. My gaze was locked on him, on the hollow certainty in his face. Tomorrow. 2 syllables that now felt heavier than the world itself. I left his room without a word, but in the hallway, I realized something chilling. I was no longer trying to prove him wrong. I was waiting for him to be right. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. My apartment felt irrelevant, now too far away from the place where everything was meant to happen. Instead, I stayed in my office, lights dimmed, sitting like a man waiting for his own trial to begin. The clock ticked relentlessly. Each minute closer to morning tightened around my chest like a noose. I opened a chart just to distract myself, but the pages blurred. Every rustle of paper sounded like Elias's prophecy, a folder too heavy, paper scattering like feathers. I slammed it shut, The silence afterward felt like punishment. At 1:12 a.m., I wandered into the monitoring unit. The hall was empty, lights low, a sterile hush filling the air. Elias was awake, of course. His eyes followed me the moment I stepped in, as if he had been waiting. "You didn't sleep," he whispered. "No," I admitted, my voice raw. "You can feel it. The dream is pressing in." I wanted to tell him to stop, to tell him he was sick, delusional, dangerous even. But the words wouldn't form. Instead, I asked a question I never thought I would. "Can it be changed?" His expression softened, almost pitying. "I've seen many deaths. None of them could be altered. They were fixed points. Yours is one of them." My hands shook. "So why warn me?" "Because," he said, leaning back, "I'm tired of watching people walk blind into their fate. At least you can see it coming." The EEG beside him showed faint temporal spikes, but no full seizure. He wasn't delirious. He was deliberate. That was the most terrifying part. By 3 a.m., I was pacing corridors alone. The stairwells seemed to breathe. Each time I passed radiology, my eyes lingered on the yellow poster, on the door that stuck, on the shadows pooling beneath the third step. I could almost hear it already, the metallic scrape he promised. When dawn began to edge through the high windows, exhaustion should have brought relief. It didn't. Instead, it brought the crushing realization that I had survived the night. And that meant today was the day Elias had seen, the last day. The day my dream became his truth. The hospital felt different the moment I walked its halls that morning. It wasn't just another day. Every light seemed dimmer. Every sound stretched too long. Every face of every colleague blurred, as though the world was receding and leaving me behind. My stethoscope weighed like iron on my neck. My white coat hung like a shroud. I forced myself into routine. Rounds, notes, dictations. The rituals of medicine should have grounded me, but instead, each one felt hollow busywork in the hours before an execution. I signed orders with trembling hands, the ink trailing shaky lines. Patients spoke to me, but their words faded, as if spoken from underwater. At 11 a.m., I passed the radiology stairwell. My steps faltered. The door was slightly ajar, just enough to see the shadowed steps within. Third step down cracked, squeaking. My chest tightened. I forced myself to keep walking, but the scent caught me then. Faint, sharp citrus mingled with metal. It wasn't my imagination anymore. Mara passed by seconds later and wrinkled her nose. "Do you smell that?" she asked. I didn't answer. I just kept moving, heart slamming against my ribs. By mid-afternoon, I couldn't focus at all. The clock seemed louder, ticking closer to an unseen deadline. At 4:17 p.m., Luis cornered me in the staff lounge. His face was pale. "Doc, please, don't go near that stairwell today. Don't tempt it." "Do you believe him too?" I whispered. Luis didn't answer. He just looked at me the way you look at someone already gone. When night finally came, I realized I had nowhere to hide. Every corridor led back to that place. Elias had said it would happen here, not at home, not in my car, but in this building. I thought I knew better than anyone. Near midnight, I checked him one last time. He lay motionless, eyes half open. His voice, though faint, still carried the weight of a verdict. "It's close now," he whispered. "The sound of metal is waiting for you." The EEG beside him was calm, almost serene. No storm, no seizure, just stillness. He wasn't dreaming anymore. He was awake. And so was I, wide awake in the nightmare he had built for me. The day had ended, but his prophecy hadn't. The last hours of my life, he had said, were already set in motion. I told myself I wouldn't go near it. I promised Lise, promised Mara, even promised myself. But promises meant nothing when every path through the hospital seemed to bend toward radiology, toward that door that stuck, toward the cracked third step. It was 1:03 a.m. when it happened. I had a patient file in my hand-thick, overstuffed, white cover, buckling with too many pages. I hadn't even realized I was walking the long corridor until I reached it. Door C, I froze. My pulse thundered in my ears. The smell hit me again, sharp citrus, mingled with iron. The very air tasted metallic. My hand trembled as I touched the handle. It stuck just as Elias had said. "Don't," I whispered to myself. "You don't have to open it." But my body betrayed me. With a sharp shove of my shoulder, the door gave way, groaning open. The stairwell yawned before me, dimly lit, shadows collecting like water at the bottom. I stepped inside. The first step creaked. The second echoed. The third cracked sang its splintering squeal exactly as foretold. My breath caught. My grip on the file tightened. Halfway down, the weight of the folder shifted. Papers slid against each other, gravity tugging. And then, like the snapping of a thread, they spilled free. Sheets cascaded through the air, fluttering white in the stairwell like startled birds. I lunged instinctively, reaching. My hand brushed only paper. My foot slipped. The folder slammed against the rail, clattering down into the shadows below. And then I heard it. A scrape, metal against concrete. Slow, deliberate. Not from my folder, not from my fall. Something else waiting below. I froze mid-step, heart clawing at my ribs. The sound came again, louder, closer. My mind screamed to retreat, to run, but my legs locked as if rooted. The prophecy was unfolding, detail by detail. And in that moment, I understood the most terrifying part. Elias hadn't dreamed my death. He was watching it. Somewhere, somehow, he was watching it happen exactly as he had said. And I still had one more step to take. The stairwell swallowed every sound but my own breathing. Papers drifted down around me, settling on the cracked concrete like pale leaves in winter. My hands shook as I clutched the railing, knuckles bone white, the smell of oranges and metal wrapping around me like a noose. The scrape came again. Metal on stone, slow, deliberate, echoing up from the dark below. Not an accident, not random. Something purposeful. My mind scrambled for an explanation. A janitor's cart? A loose pipe? Anything but what I knew in my chest. This was what Elias had promised. I forced myself to look down. Shadows pooled at the landing, thick, shifting. I couldn't see what made the sound, only feel its presence. Waiting. Behind me, the stairwell door slammed shut. The echo cracked through me like a gunshot. I spun, heart hammering. The handle wouldn't budge. Stuck, just as Elias had said. Trapped. "Elias," I whispered, though he wasn't there. My own voice bounced back at me, thin, frightened. Why me? And then I heard it not from below, but inside my head. His voice, calm, inevitable, because I saw it. The next moment blurred. My shoe slipped on scattered pages. My grip wrenched free from the rail. The world tilted. My body pitched forward. The sound came once more, metal grinding on concrete, deafening now inside my bones. My last coherent thought wasn't of family, or medicine, or even my own life. It was the broken green umbrella in my car trunk, the thing I refused to throw away. Proof that I had always been the kind of man who couldn't let go. And then there was nothing but the fall-white pages swirling, shadows rushing up, the prophecy closing like a fist. Elias had been right. Every detail. My death had never been a possibility. It had always been an appointment.